Someone's unmuted.
Somebody is. Oh, okay. All right, so we don't have Member Davis. Member Moss is here.
We did. No. Oh, sorry.
No?
I thought I heard
Okay.
yes.
Vice Chair Earl.
Yes.
Member Norton.
Yes.
Member Green. Member Green is here. Member Straight. Thought we had Member Straight. No?
We did, but we muted him.
Oh, Member Straight, are you out there?
I'm here.
All right. And Member Hart, Vice Chair Hart is here. All right, so we do have a quorum. And let's see, I forget. Any other formalities when we're in a carryover? We're good? Okay. So let's turn to reports and requirements recommendations. I guess I can sort of give a brief intro and then turn it to Greg. Okay. Let's see. So I don't think we have Director Thronson with us, do we? On the. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let's see. We could do action item 5.2 and come back to that. Let's do that. Director Thronson's been very helpful coming. Oh, what do you know? Are you okay, or do you need a second to tee up the training issue on reports and requirements? Okay. So Director Thronson very helpfully came to reports and requirements. One of the issues raised in the task force was training is sometimes associated with reports. Sometimes it is another element where there might be some duplication and streamlining possibilities. And so Director Thronson walked through several of those. So I'll turn it to her. She's brought to the task force, which approved bringing it onto here to make some modifications and streamlining to try to eliminate the burden while retaining what we need. So if you want to make that motion, I know there's at least one amendment to the motion, but let's tee that up if we could. Sorry, 5.1. So I'll just present the motion, and then we can turn to Director Thronson. Oh, I'm sorry.
On today's agenda of anything that we didn't cover yesterday. So there is a 5.1.
Okay, it was 11.
Yes. So the backup is yesterday's agenda. You can go to both places, but it is on stage. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Got it. Sorry, I'm reading from my handy dandy chair's agenda, which has today's numbers on it. So let me read in the motion, and then we can turn to Director Thronson, then any amendments. So the motion is to direct staff to amend the following training requirements in Utah Code or Board Rule: child sexual abuse prevention and awareness from every 2 years to every 3 years and prior to initial employment; suicide prevention from every 3 years to align with license renewal and initial licensure; harassment from every year to every 3 years and prior to initial employment; personal protective gear and bloodborne pathogens from annually to every 3 years; assessment of student achievement and utilization of assessment results to inform instruction in rule from annually to every 2 years and prior to initial employment; ethics and UPACs rule from annually to upon initial licensure and upon renewal with written information provided in off years; and school finance policies and rule from annually to every 3 years and prior to initial employment. So that's the motion out of the task force. And I think we need a second, since that's not a actual standing committee report. So is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's turn to Director Thronson for discussion if we could, and then open it for amendments or other discussion.
All right, so I have gotten feedback from either staff, mostly staff, only staff, that they're worried about the frequency being reduced. So, for example, we might be seeing an increasing in bullying to reduce harassment training. Like, shouldn't we be increasing?
Can you just direct us to the bullet points?
Sure.
There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
The third
6,
bullet
7,
point, harassment from every year to every 3 years and prior to initial employment. All of these you would want to have before somebody starts, right? Like, or at least within that initial time. but there was concerns Ben has expressed, like in the ethics place, like we have ethics violations. Shouldn't we be training every year? You are always going to have a percentage of educators who aren't aware, no matter how often you do the training. Repetition for learning varies by learners. And so I think some of it goes to, yes, we've been doing these for every year and it hasn't led to 0% of violation. And if an LEA, what this does is reduces the frequency that an LEA has to do these. If they have an issue of concern in their LEA, so they're seeing increased harassment concerns, they can increase the frequency, but this would reduce the burden for those that aren't experiencing increased harassment concerns, for example. So I don't have teeth in this game. I am happy wherever you all land. It really came from the principal working group. We convened a group of principals and superintendents and said, what are the things keeping you from being the lead learner, the lead motivator of instruction in your buildings? And these annual reporting requirements came up as a high priority for them. And so that was then brought to the task force to say, here's what the principals and superintendents would say. We brought that back, and this is the list they landed on. Now, all of these, depending on your background or your specialization, you might feel passionate about. I tried to look for evidence of what should the frequency of training be, what's the best practice when it comes to training, and it really would come down to the design of training, not necessarily the frequency of training. If you do it well and they really learn it, it's kind of like in classrooms where we said, I taught it, but did kids learn it are two different things. Training can be like that. We did it, we did the check mark, but did they learn it? And if they didn't, I think leaving it up to the LEAs to be able to make those decisions of, we are seeing an influx of this in our community. For example, suicide prevention. They might say, we're going to do more in that area, but right now they don't have that flexibility because we require it at a certain interval. And this would still have a requirement at certain intervals. Many of these would take code change. Some are rule change. I tried to put that in parentheses so you would know if it was a rule or code change. So even if this body decides, yes, let's proceed with some of these or all of these, we'll still need to go through the legislative process. So I'm open to your questions, Board Chair, handing it back to you, and you have the list of recommendations that came out of that work.
Thank you very much, Director Thronson. And let's open it up. Vice Chair Earl and then Member Hymas.
First, Matt.
Oh, me.
Okay, I had just a couple of questions. One of those would be around the ethics and UPAC, where we're changing from, and actually I probably have an amendment. Let me just make the amendment. Okay, on ethics and UPAC, which then you can ask, and on also school finance policy, at the end of both of those, I would make a motion that we add, so it would read ethics and UPAC rule from annually, so we're going to scratch annually to, well, we're not really, hold on, sorry. This is broad. This isn't exact language, right? This is broad?
Well, it was my intent of helping you to know, like, what's the frequency change and if anything else.
Okay, so then I would add at the end of both of those, which are the last two bullet points, and when significant changes occur for both of those, just because we just made significant changes, right, to some of our policies, and you would want people to be aware of that,
Yeah,
right? So
that
that
makes
I would
sense.
just add that to it so that they are trained when there is a need for it, but it's not you know what I mean? It still could be broader than that. And I do agree that most educators don't need this training annually, right? It just becomes, I think they actually turn off more than they turn on. So it's what's the right frequency, like you had said before. But I do think if we have updates, we need to make sure that those are conveyed and that districts know that. So that language would be, and when changes occur. And I didn't get a second, but I spoke to it, and I can speak again if you'd like.
Is there a second? There is a second.
And I'm not going to speak again, but I think those two
Question.
areas may need that as changes occur, right? And maybe those already happen, but anyways.
Just a question, changes in the law or code or some other changes? Do we need clarity there? Did you mean, situational changes or legal changes?
I was thinking of code and rule,
So maybe
not
we say that
necessarily,
if that's what you're,
so I would add code and rule to law. Yep, to law.
Those in law and licensing can laugh for that.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not sure.
You're like, I'm
A
not
little
sure why that's
awkward
humorous.
now, but ha ha ha, that was funny.
Meeting.
whatever feels good and right for, anyways, for the,
Did Hammurabi come into the discussion? Did you go not that far back?
okay, that's just
All right,
what,
sorry.
that's my
We got-
recommendation. What else was I gonna say? Do we feel like in any of these areas?
That's been teed
Oh,
up as a motion. Sorry.
Ah.
Should we take a vote on that one?
Yes, let's
Okay,
do before
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion to that motion? Member Hymus on that one or on a separate one?
Thank you. So for this motion, as well as the overall, so I guess my question for this motion would go to Vice Chair Earl, the maker of that motion. I'm sorry, I can talk until you're, okay, you're ready.
I'm ready.
Why just ethics and UPAC? If there was a change in school finance, why wouldn't we want to train people as soon as it happened? I would think, and I could be wrong, that
That's what I added was both of those.
well, why not the entire list? Like anytime there's a code change or a rule change, you wouldn't do it necessarily immediately, but maybe at the beginning of the year, we're going to say, hey, here's the changes that have happened or something. Maybe it's a shorter training. Anyway, with just think about that. But as I'm thinking of this, and I get where we're coming from, right? As a educator, you know, sometimes you have to say, okay, I actually need you to focus on this one, right? To your teachers that you're training, or, you know, let's give me some time, focus, so we can get through this. You know, it's become this checkbox, which is problemsome. That's not a word. Problematic, troublesome. I make up words sometimes.
Highly problematic.
So what I would ask then. Thank you. What I would ask, as we watch this, I get the concerns as well from staff saying, well, you're going from every year, even if they're not listening, maybe they're hearing something every year to now every 3 years. At what point do we have to, as an oversight entity, do we have to say, you know what, it's not working? We have to go back to annually. It's still not great, but it's better than what it is. Are we just keeping data for 3 to 5 years and then going to bring this back? Are we planning to track that data? Like, what are we doing to ensure that our students are safe, right? Right now, this seems more convenient for the educators, and it absolutely will be. But what about our students?
Dr. Johnson?
Thank you. I don't think I introduced myself. Dr. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. For that question, when I asked about data, I was unable to get it. So currently, it's not something we are actually tracking. One data point that was shared by Dr. Voorhees was in the bullying piece, that there's a lot of schools asking for training on bullying, but I think that's more about teachers knowing how to handle bullying than necessarily this harassment training. And so we are kind of, it's a dearth that we don't have a lot on. I think if we saw UPAC would probably be our best place of if we saw more UPAC recommendations of teachers violating ethics policy. Ben would be able to say, ooh, we need to have a conversation. Like I said, staff is not necessarily supportive of all of these things, but we had to find places that we did think. There are 45 annual trainings on the books. This is only about 7 of them we're bringing, because some of them are very specific. Like if you're the one giving the diabetic shots, that's not everyone needs that training. But these ones were like pretty universal that everybody has to do them, and maybe they aren't needed every year. You all can think back, if you've been an educator, to bloodborne pathogens, you know not to touch it if it's warm, wet, and not yours. Like that could be a 30-second training in some ways. There you go. So I think some of it's just us. We're so used to it. It's what we've always done. But evidence that these things are making a difference, I don't know that we have it one way, positively or negatively at this time.
Okay, member Bogus, Lear, and then Hart.
Oh.
Member Carey, sorry.
I was on and I was, so
Oh, okay.
I'm at the end of the queue now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
I appreciate Director Thomson, and I appreciate the work that the task force did on this. I am a wonderful participant in your yearly trainings. And I would offer that we don't need less training, we need better training. There's a lot of trainings where it consists of clicking a link, checking a box, and pressing next. And the document that pulls up is 7 pages. And so I don't know that that is actually training. Secondly, I would offer that some of the training, instead of preventing issues, in my opinion, is a how-to guide, how to abuse a child. And I know that might cause people to be prickly, but I would ask that maybe the board receive copies of some of these trainings, because there are some trainings that I think, oh, in the hands of the wrong person, this is really, really scary. And I don't need to know how to do these things to a child. I need to know how to identify the signs that something is occurring in their life that I need to report. The signs and symptoms of abuse, as opposed to how to get the job done. And so I would love to gain access to all, for every board member, so that they can have a better understanding of maybe what I'm saying, but that we could have access to those trainings to look at among us. And it's just a thought. I know that everyone's going to love me, but I think we should subject ourselves to the same trainings we mandate, so that we know, A, how much time it takes an educator to get this job done, and B, we know what they're being trained in. So those are just my thoughts. That I don't know that I would advocate for a lower frequency, but I would advocate for better training, specifically in the signs and symptoms of abuse, manifested behaviors that come from exposure to pornography, manifested behaviors when a child has experienced certain types of abuse. Things like that were covered 20 years ago, and I still have them locked deep inside. But today's training doesn't cover manifested behaviors. It covers other things, and I would love to see us move in a direction where we're identifying signs and symptoms instead of some of the other things we're learning. So it's just some thoughts I would love to look for, and I look forward to continued discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lear.
I'm okay with these amendments. I talked to Member Davis some about this process and how maybe it was Brent, I can't remember both of them, but how the committee came to these conclusions. And I somewhat agree with Member Bogus. I changed it to annually, change it to every 3 years, but we've got to do something, think through doing more on the front end, because all we do is punish, and we keep punishing, and there are data. It takes some time, but somebody can go into that UPAC database and tell us where this has been helpful, where it isn't, how many reprimands there are, all that kind of stuff is available. And there were investigators here at one point who did that, and we need that data. So I would rather, again, I don't have an amendment today, but rather than perseverate about when the changes occur, or 3 years or every 1 year, I would like to have training revised every year to reflect the data that we find from these particular issues. And I agree, we need training that is more, and sometimes it's available out there. There is excellent professional practice training. We just have to commit to spending the money. And some of you have seen it probably from NASTEC. It's excellent. But we have to commit to saving the money, to spending the money, saving the money, spending the money. So I don't care. I'll vote one way or another on these. But the issue is, we have got, even if we don't solve, this is one of those wicked problems that we're never going to solve, probably, but we've got to try. I mean, the residual ethics training that we have, I wrote like 15 years ago, and it was intended to last for 2 years. And instead, we just keep putting a Band-Aid on it, and a Band-Aid on it, and a Band-Aid on it. It needs to be updated with teachers involved, with administrators involved, and we need to look at what's out there and do something. And please, please, please don't just put this in the minutes and let it go. I hope we need to spend way more time at the front end. If we care about caring, and I'm just focusing on one area, if we care about keeping teachers in this system, we've got to stop punishing and start educating, working with, schooling, call it whatever you want. Training has become so cliched. But we've got to stop the punishment and start the training, and it's got to be better. So that's I don't care what I vote. It won't change until we commit to those changes.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member, just quick note. I think it's a very important comment, and I think a lot of things that we've discussed in reports and requirements have led upstream to some of those questions. And so when we're talking about reports about, student success, et cetera, one of the main questions they have is not just, I hate paperwork, it's how are you using this? How is this making things better? And so I think these questions are important. They surface in that group, but they raise things that we have a systemic obligation to look at. So great comment, Member or Vice Chair Hart.
First of all, it'll be very hard to take what data we do get at UPAC and create some kind of causal something. There might be some correlations, but we would have to know quite a bit more about what the LEAs are doing themselves with their internal discipline structures in order to understand, in order to put any sort of relationship to it. Second, I applaud, for a variety of reasons, I applaud the opportunity or the trying to space it out better. There are teachers that can recite these trainings, and it may or may not, as we know, have impact on their practices. The ones that need to hear it don't. The ones that don't need to hear it can recite it, and that's just a reality of any sort of training, which is why I would like a competency-based model. At the very least, a pretest or a test out option, so that we actually have a reason to put these teachers through this training and to use our best practices. In addition, I was really excited, but then I tried to put it into practice. And when you have something that's every 2 years and something that's every 3 years and something that's every, how do you do that as a group? Like you'd have, each one of us could be on a different schedule. That's a nightmare. If we put these into code, I would suggest even year training, odd year training, some sort of rotation rather than by person you get it every 2 years. So we know that you did it in 1992, and then we got to track you to 1995, and we got to track you across LEAs. So I'm extremely interested in this topic, and I apologize for not bringing some of these up earlier so we could come up with some ideas. But there are teachers that know this information better than us because of their personal training and experiences. We should give them the opportunity to opt out. I do think, what did you say, 70, 45, 72? 45. So I have often said we give teachers generally 185 days. Kids go to school for 180 days. We have that many trainings to get them to do during their work hours, and we are not giving them the time to do the training and prepare for their work and do the work, unless you expect them to do trainings while students are sitting in front of them, and those students deserve an education. So I think we have a number of problems that we could put our heads together and fix. We need additional time set aside for training. We need competency-based options. We need it to be able to be deployed on a wide scale rather than on an individual basis. And the trainings do need to be timely and not created every 15 years. So I just hope that's my piece.
Thank you. Got copious notes here
Thank you.
for what that's worth.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it. I don't know if people want an amendment here or if this is for further discussion later, but lots of things to get on. So yeah, let's get down into the Titanic. Let's get down to the boiler room. I don't know what it is. Where's the Member Bogus?
I have a motion once that has been voted on. Well, I'm going to choose not to speak until after this has been voted on. Thank you.
Okay. There was a question about whether this applies to each bullet point or only those two. I don't know if that was a request or a friendly or just a question.
A consideration by the maker of the motion.
I think that's a friendly, that's right.
So
I just think things change.
the proposed amendment is to add to the end of each bullet point and when significant changes in law occur. Is that correct? It's accepted by the maker. Any objection from the body? Hearing none, that's a friendly. So what we have in front of us is a motion to amend. Okay.
No, I'm just saying it's.
Oh, got somebody online. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My peripheral. Cindy Davis is with us. So, Superintendent, you want to, Superintendent Dixon and then Member Davis.
I can think of a really simple substitute motion that might address some of the things that members have said. So let me just lay out some ideas, and then if anybody wants to amend, or you just keep going with what you've got. Reflecting on really valid comments from all of you board members, we've been talking about things that need to be updated. It takes time, personnel, and money. And I listened to finance today with a lot of great questions from board members about the way you might spend some of that money. And if you really want to do some of the kinds of things we're talking about, training is sort of a strange word in this place, but in this space rather. But we all partake in certain modules, I will call them, that are required. For example, I just went through a series of, I don't remember if it was 6 or 8, around phishing and smishing and, all the security things. And those are little, I don't even think they take 3 to 5 minutes, but they're kind of competency based. You're reading a thing. You've all probably been through training like this. You read the thing, you click on it, and if you get it wrong, then there's this component that comes up and gives you information about what the right answer is and why it's the right answer. And you have to have a certain pass rate to be able to move on. Those are simple. Again, you can do them anytime. I mean, they're asynchronous. And there have got to be ways, I think those come from the Department of Technology Services of the state, and they do a really nice job. They're great instructional videos. So I think if the board was willing to take some of your discretionary funds, which are one time, it would be a good use of development to update and look at all of the things that you've talked about for training and ways to then make them competency-based, streamline them, get at the things, Member Boggess, that you were talking about, that we're down the road and there are things that we're not talking about. Student data privacy is one where there's training, but there are all sorts of ways that we have to be more vigilant about that as educators as well. So if you wanted to direct staff to take all the information you've given us and anybody that wants to give additional information, and then we bring some proposals back to you with what it might cost, that might be a way to capture everything that you're trying to get at rather than worry about the frequency at this point. I'm just throwing that out there, right or wrong. Thanks.
Well, let's take a look. We have a motion on frequency based on the working group recommendation and an amendment on the floor. But the broader question of addressing it through funding, I guess our next opportunity to bring up a discretionary funding proposal could be now. We could simply just ask staff, as you framed it up, right, to go back and bring a proposal at the next board meeting in January, right?
Maybe to Finance Committee.
Okay. Let's rule on what, or not rule, move, vote, whatever we're going to do. Let's vote on the proposed amendment that comes out of the group, and then we can turn to cost of using some discretionary funds for the broader look. So the motion before the body from Member Earl, as amended through the friendly from Member Hymas, is that the board amend the training motion for each item in the motion to add a requirement for training to also occur, quote, when significant changes to law occur. Any further discussion to that proposed? Oh, Vice Chair Davis, sorry.
Thank you. I just had a question.
Go for it.
I'm wondering if the makers of motions, this amendment and the other amendment,
could help me understand. This seems mammoth. We make significant changes to laws all the time, and we don't put in additional trainings for those. It sounds to me like this is saying we're gonna train when any significant changes to law occur. Is it saying that we're gonna train annually or immediately, or now we're not doing the 2 to 3 years? The other question I have was for the member Earls. I'm on board with all of it, except not sure. I don't think logistically it would be, I think it would be difficult to do the middle part of providing information on the off years. Specifically to what Member Hart said, you know, now who is keeping track of when you get licensed, when your relicensure is, when you're off on your years of licensure? That is really difficult. The way that the task force set up this rotation currently is that we do an initial training upon hire, and then they roll into the every 3 years. So maybe they get training again the following year because the whole faculty is on that year. But it was pretty logistically easy. It seems like this is making it more convoluted, and maybe we can get more clarity on that. And then, so I don't take your time on the next vote for the whole thing. I will say that in the meeting, I disagreed with the child abuse portion of reducing that training because I've had several advocates talk to me as of late and gone to meetings where legislators were in attendance saying they're trying to get more training rather than less. But in full disclosure, all of the LEAs at the task force did not concur with me. So I just want to publicly say I'm going to vote for those, but I don't agree with the first one. I just don't want to take the board's time to divide the question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, as I understand the motion, it is to add when significant changes occur in law only to those that are bullet pointed for possible revision from every year or 2 years to every 3 years or something. I don't understand this to be applying to all training. This is just sort of a caveat to the reduction that was proposed out of the task force for these bullet points, right? So just to clarify. Yes, Member Bogus?
Significant? I don't disagree with the concept. I'm just wondering what it means.
Yep.
I suppose we could, and we run into this on every word because
Well,
it's
I
important.
don't know.
Lawyers,
I don't
No,
know that I
law-
want to
this is an
debate
important
every
question.
single word, but
Yeah, no, I'm saying that
there are
that's
things
an
that are
important thing.
little in code but significant in practice.
Sure. Is
And
there a way to define
there are
that?
things
Let's-
that are
let's
very
put it to Director
verbose yet
Thronson.
have little impact.
Yeah.
So
Director Thronson, would that have meaning as one trying to implement?
I would be fine, but what I think is significant, you may not think is significant, right? So Angie was whispering substantive might
there
be
we
the
go.
better. Because like when we make technical edits to the law, we wouldn't require them to update training. But when it changes your practice, and maybe that's what you say, when practice changes occur in the law, then this happens. When you physically have to do something, not physically, but when you have to do something different, when the action changes to law, that's when we would change. That's how I would have interpreted it as staff.
So substantive might work better than
I think
substantial.
so.
Member Bogus, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, what if one were to say, and I'm asking, not
suggesting whatever, something to the effect of when changes to law occurs that would substantially affect practice, or I don't know. I'm thinking about the impact when the teacher's practice has to change, the training needs to occur, or when the finance manager's practice needs to change, the training needs to occur. I don't even know how to articulate that. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting that motion, but I appreciate the opportunity to discuss.
Well, that sounds like language that might be teed up as a friendly. Is that another word? The way you articulate it sounded good to me, but I'm not sure how they captured it. It's not my motion. I'm just trying to help frame it up for.
We just had a task force that out.
Huh? Yeah, comment?
that something
I did record it. I've been
that would provide people the opportunity to do what they said to do. Oh, I apologize.
I was just talking to John about, we brought it to the board.
If this is coming back, do we need to micromanage this? Or do we just need to know that we want something?
Joe, this is your,
Yeah.
get Joe here.
Oh, member Carey, I'm sorry, what do you mean by? Do we have the language frame? Let's just make sure we got this and see whether it's a friendly and we can move on. Is this, capture your suggestion, member Bogus? The impact practice.
Yeah, I believe that, I do believe it encompasses us. I don't know that, are we voting on this?
Sent to staff, or are we voting on this as a final language that kind of goes out into the?
This would be language to amend the proposal. Let's see, this is direct staff to amend the following training requirements in code or board rule. And so if this is being added to each bullet point, some of those would be board rule. Those are the ones that have Pren's rule on them. And that would be done internally. The others would require legislative recommendation. So some of these would be actually taking action on the board rule elements.
Okay,
It's kind of a hodgepodge, but yeah, it's sort of
Okay.
acting where we can and recommending where somebody else has to take it. Well, hold on, I'm just making sure this is good.
Thank
Is
you,
this a
sir.
friendly?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody, any objections? Okay, sorry. We got the friendly framed up. Member Carey. I don't want to lose it because I've been known to do that, to lose a, got member Carey up here.
Yep, but Carrie is not on.
Oh, here they are. He's live.
Thank you. I'd like to make a substitute motion, and that would be to table this matter until our January full board meeting, and then I'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay, motion to table. Is there a second? Seconded? Speak to the motion.
Yeah, just a couple things, and to echo what Board Member Davis said, last month I was at a human trafficking and anti-sexual harassment abuse prevention symposium at Weber State University, and they brought in experts across these fields, and there is so much happening in terms of training, knowledge, and just like every other field, it's we know more and more about how to look at these issues. And I do feel that if we're just looking at delaying the training or the cadence that it's offered, I don't think that helps in reality the teachers or the students. I think really what needs to happen is we need to look at the training itself and the alternatives. And so Superintendent Dixon had mentioned in her remarks that, look, it won't take a lot of time, but if we could have some time just to put some proposals together for the board to consider. And I would ask the superintendent, with the chair's permission, if 1 month between now and the next board meeting would be sufficient. And if so, I think that would be a much more, not only efficacious, but beneficial use of our time to look at making a difference for our teachers and students rather than just the cadence that these trainings are being offered. So with the chair's permission, can we ask superintendent to address that? Or the vice chair's permission?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Consulting. All right, so the motion is to table for.
But I would like the
a
chair's
month.
permission to ask the superintendent to address whether the 30 days would be sufficient
Please do.
time. Thank you.
Yes, please. And so we're talking here about tabling a motion on the frequency and then also raising the broader questions of improving training. I mean, if the question is a review of training as it exists and consideration of potential improvement, is it that broad, or is it just the question that came out of the group? So what we have is a group of principals that met with Director Thronson, right? They recommended a reduction in frequency. That then came to a group of superintendents and directors. They also recommended a reduction in frequency. So that was passed out of the task force. it does raise a much broader question. So I guess the question is, are you seeking to table the discussion on frequency and the recommendation from those groups? Are you also looking at whether, and that I assume we could address in 30 days and see what people think. Are you also asking whether we consider a month from now a broader kind of review overhaul? That's a bigger question, right? So what, is that a combined question for Superintendent Dixon?
Yes, I
Yeah,
think she'd be
okay.
in best position to answer.
All right, if that's what you're trying to set up. I just want to make sure we keep in mind what they recommended and then what we're considering could be two separate but related matters. All right, Superintendent Dixon and Member Straight. Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the question got much bigger than I first heard it, so I'll just reflect on what I think I heard. And in talking with Dr. Thronson in a side whisper, I think what my intention that Dr. Thronson would certainly take on, and that is just some general ways for the board to consider, not really getting down into the weeds, but just kind of high level. Here's some things that we think would be better served in the field if we did it this way, and it would take perhaps this amount of money and this amount in time to accomplish it. To actually dive into the weeds, we would need work with purchasing and kind of getting the landscape out there, what the possibilities are. And over the holidays, that might be very tricky. So the current 30, if it were 30 days without the holidays in between, I would say that would be very doable. Given where we're at right now, I worry about just being able to get all of that done. A lot of companies and people are on vacation during this time, but we could do our best and just see what we can bring to you by January. Maybe just some general ideas, if nothing else.
So there is a motion, and the motion is to table this for January. Member Straight, you're on.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, I've been sitting here listening to the discussion, and of course, I was listening to the discussion when we met with the Reports and Requirements Task Force, and the discussions are much different. Time was a major factor with the task force. We have talked about that. That has been part of it. There's also been the quality of the training. Does the quality of the training need to be better? And many other topics without going on. What kind of time frames are we under? And I think we do have another Reports and Requirements Task Force meeting. Could we ask for input from some of the issues brought up by the board today? Because I think there is some substantial differences, and perhaps there's some responses from the task force that would be helpful to this discussion.
So thanks. I can answer that. We do have a task force meeting December 12th or 13th, so we could bring that back and bring it here. There's the kind of immediate question that came out of the task force, which is the frequency of training. Then there's the broader question. So if the motion is to table this, if people choose that, it could come back in January with additional input from the task force, at which point we could address whatever we know about the broader question. That could be later. But at least the technical motion, what we have before us today is a recommendation from the task force on frequency. And as I understand the motion is to table that till January, right? So if the question is, would we have more input by then the answer is yes. And then what does that do to the broader question, right? That's kind of and frankly, that's a really important part of this discussion. Every time we have a discussion that comes out of the task force, it raises these larger important questions. So at least as I understand it, that makes sense in terms of the response. Yes, we could get that input and bring it back for discussion in January. Further discussion then to the motion to table the agenda until January. Member Wood, Member, am I phone right?
It's Bogus, Public to Wood, Hart.
Okay. Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. I'm just wondering if I need to amend this motion to ask staff to include information on a pretest and whether or not we should create a standing committee or an ad hoc committee to go through these trainings to ensure that we're doing our due diligence as the board. Should that be an amendment, or is that something that can go forward without an amendment?
So you're talking about amendment to the motion to table?
Yes. Because Member Hart makes a very good point. A pretest that says you don't have to take this training would be very valuable.
So I think, let me just clarify what's before the board. We can certainly expand it, but the frequency question is what came out of the task force. So I don't know that would, tabling that item would just table the question on frequency. And if other things are being proposed in terms of the manner of conducting it, pre-testing, quality, nature, I would think any of that could be brought in
Okay, so I'll bring a secondary
for
motion.
discussion in January or referral to a committee, a standing committee before that. Yeah,
I'll bring a secondary
I'm
motion.
sorry, I'm
Thank you,
working
sir.
through my
No, this is
answer,
fine. Thank
just
you.
like you're working through your question. But yeah, I think that could be brought separately without affecting the motion to table. All right, who else? Let's see, Member Wood? Oh, back to Dr. Thronson, then Member Wood.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Just on these points, so out of those, especially the task force, they brought up the need for better training. That was going to be a sub-conversation today of here's the motions because legislative session is coming and some of these are code changes. The sooner we can start working with legislators, the more likely we can get these code changed. Rule not as timely in terms of we can change that in the next few months, that will be fine. I worry more about the code change ones. The better training, a competency-based model where teachers could say, do I already know this content? Would be awesome. I think they'd appreciate that. There's a lot of training across the state that what the task force talked about was like, could you curate what's already being done? And maybe there's a really good one that you could just adopt at the state, and then all of us are not having to design our own training. They would love that. I would be happy to come back next month and bring you a high-level proposal of what that could look like. We would need to prioritize. Again, there's 45 trainings. Which ones, would it be these 7? Would it be others that you'd want? Like I can look at it and say here, that would be, I think, a priority item of you saying, these are the trainings we want you to go after first. So if we're worried about child abuse, if we're worried about harassment, like which ones would the state want to look at? And I'm just going to be honest, from a capacity, we do not have any more capacity in teaching and learning. So there will be some support of something related to staffing to be able to convene people to do this, to get bids and RFPs and all the things that would take to do these things. But this is what the state would love for you to do. Though that task force was very honest of saying, why is 160 some odd LEAs having to create their own training? And these are required at a state level. Why doesn't the state provide those? So what you're talking about is exactly what they would love. Happy to bring you back a proposal. And the schedule part, not really, if all of them have that initial employment, then everybody gets what they need. Some will get it a little sooner, but no, you don't have to worry about if you're new or old or current or not, because you're getting on initial employment. So schedule's not, we had that conversation in task force too. I just wanted to call that out. I think that's it. We could look at UPAC to help with the data to prioritize what training we might want to do of like, we see a lot of violations in this area, or it might just be, what are we passionate about that we want to make sure every teacher is confident and competent to make those choices. Just wanted to put the timing, it's mostly legislative driven in terms of we rushed through task force in a couple of sessions to make sure we could be here today to give adequate time for the legislature.
Representative Pulsifer has the bill file on that, so she's been kind of leading the charge on trying to streamline, make more efficient, et cetera, respond to the request to look for efficiency. So she's got a bill file open. That's the timeline on code changes, but we could certainly consider that in January. The motion to table is to bring that part back in January, then talk about the broader initiatives. So, Member Wood, right? Did we not get to Member Wood yet?
No, we did not.
Sorry.
So that was my question. Are there ones that, if we postpone this, is it timely enough to discuss this in January to still move forward on work with the legislature?
We could, yeah.
Because it's a whole nother year if we don't. So that's
correct.
that
So
we would have to
Representative Pulsifer has a
prioritize.
bill file open. We have a couple more that are not related to training that came out of the task force that we've been trying to, frankly, we've been trying to talk about legislative and systemic approaches to reports and requirements so that we could tee it up for the legislative session. A lot of what we found is rule related or within our control, and that's the kind of thing where we don't have quite the time pressure. And so this would be one of them. How do we approach training generally? We also had offers from USBA in USSA, the School Board Association, Superintendent Association. Some of that came out of some of the focus groups we had where they were saying, hey, why don't we do this together? We've got training, I know a great district that's already doing this well. Why don't we? So that goes to some of these efficiencies and redundancies. So that's an opportunity as well to work with those organizations to approach this. So I think there's a lot of good discussion there. But yes, in terms of the specific task force stuff, we tried to tee things up. They need to hear about it by January if we want to put it in Pulsifer's bill this session.
So second follow-up question, what Cindy said over in her comment was that the intent was a rolling training so that it would just be happening and people would come in and get on that schedule. I'm not seeing that in how this is worded. So is there some disconnect between how the motion is being prepared and what the intent of the task force was? Because if the motion changed to a more of a rolling content, I think some of these we could move forward on today. So
Director Thronson, do you want to hit that one?
Yes, as I'm re-looking at the motion, the only one that isn't addressing that. So if you, with almost all of them, they say prior to initial employment, which puts you on, you got it this year. It might also be the district's year. You're going to be covered, but it might not be the district's year, but you had it on initial employment. So you're always going to be within the time frame required because you have to have it upon initial employment. The one we would need to fix is the bloodborne pathogens because I don't have that language there, but the rest have initial licensure or initial employment. So if we can just add initial employment and prior to initial employment for bloodborne pathogens, then you're always going to be, because they'll have started it. And if the school district did it last year, then they're going to get it in 2 years. They're still going to meet the intent of the law that within every 3 years, they just actually had it more frequently for that new educator in that community, but they won't be out of compliance. They'll have had it at least within the 3-year requirement, if that makes sense. We worked this through. It took a minute to remember what it in the task force, but ultimately, because everyone has to have it on initial employment, then they're on cycle, whether their district is doing it next year or in 3 years, they got what they needed to be in compliance for those new educators to their district, whether they're new or not. So it would just be amending the fourth bullet.
Does that answer the question? Remember, we can't amend the fourth bullet now because the motion on the floor is a motion to table, but that's, I guess, a suggestion of what could be done either now or in January, depending on the outcome of the vote. But does that answer the follow-up? Go ahead.
So when this says every 2 years or every 3 years, this is saying the district provides this. Okay, sorry, my misunderstanding, because I was thinking it was saying they just had to take it every 3 years as opposed to delivery.
It's when the
receiving
district would
versus
be,
delivery.
because they're the one required to offer the training.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
All right. Other lights? I don't think I see any. Okay. With that, the motion is that the board postpone the agenda item 5.1 until January. Let's see. Let's go ahead and vote. And I will just say that that agenda item would include the specific recommendations that came out of the task force on frequency and then the broader discussion that was raised, right? That's the intent.
Do you want to do a separate motion on the broader intent? Because that needs to go.
We can't. I mean, it kind of came up with the agenda item, so I would assume the same discussion might come around that. It wouldn't be up for action in January. So you might be right. Technically, let's just say it as it is, and that's fine. The action item that was brought before the board today would be postponed until January, which may or may not also turn into a broader discussion. So 5.1.1. Okay. Oh, yes. Let's see. All right. So voting is open, but let me ask those online. Member Davis, while others are voting, what's your vote? Yay or nay on postpone the agenda item until January 5.1.1?
Nay.
Okay, who else do we have? Member Straight?
Nay for straight.
Sorry?
Nay.
Nay, that's a
No.
I think I heard nay. Sorry, yay and nay are a little similar when you're remote. He's a no? Okay, I got you. Who else do we have online? That's everybody
We only
online?
have 12 votes in, but do we have 15 people? Is there anyone?
Oh, I
missing?
hadn't voted. Looks like let's see. We got 13. Who don't we have?
Sarah.
Oh, Memorial. Okay, it's got enough to pass. We just want to make sure everybody's in. We missing anybody? That's all? Oh, and she's not with us, right? Or is she? Okay. All right. So that passes by a vote of 8-6. The no votes are Member Reel, Member Moss, Member Straight, Member Davis, Member Wood, and Member Hymas. Okay, so that passes. That is tabled to January. We have Member Hart has a motion.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart, excuse me.
I move. Just a second. I would like to, I believe that the motion that we just made pertains to timing. I would like to make a broader motion that that the board directs staff to evaluate current educator training requirements and provide recommendations on potential changes to a committee. I think our work goes through committee to the full board. That's an appropriate process. I also think that we should not just assume that that last motion included all of it, because that material wasn't provided in backup. Does that make sense? So I'm proposing this. I'm open to amendments on when. I don't necessarily think it needs to be in January. I don't even necessarily think it needs to be in February. But this is my motion. And I already spoke to it.
One clarification.
I would need a
Please.
second first.
Second. Just point of clarification. When you say the educator training, are you limiting it to the bullet points that were in the?
No,
It
I'm
would be-
talking about the 45 identified trainings that all teachers are supposed to have in order to teach.
So the motion is to direct staff to, oh, you got it up there. Direct
To,
staff to evaluate current educator training requirements and provide recommendations on potential changes to a committee. So that would then go to our agenda setting conference, right? Okay, that's been seconded. Discussion of the motion, Member Vargas. Okay,
And I would move to add the information, including information about pretest logistics, content, and logistical commitments of the board, meaning the 15 elected members of the board. I apologize. So it would say including information about pretest logistics, content, and the logistical commitments of the board.
Content training.
Well, that's implied. May I speak to the motion?
did we get a second? I think we did. Actually, no, we didn't. Second, Member Green, yes, please speak to the motion.
I'm not a fan of competency-based trainings. I know others are. I'm not. But I do like the idea of a pre-assessment that determines whether or not you even need to go through the training at all. There's great merit to that thought, and I would love to explore it. I think the board having a very full and robust understanding of the content of these trainings is super important. And then also what our commitment is as we move forward in this process is important to know, so we know what we're taking on when we take this lift, because I think it will be a big lift. Thank you, sir. That's all I have to say.
Okay, that motion has been made and seconded. Further discussion to the motion to amend that the board add and provide information on pretest logistics, content, and the logistical commitments of the board to the motion. Seeing no lights, let's vote on that amendment.
That's bowling, Matthew, stop it.
Yeah. Member Davis, do you need me to restate the motion for the folks online?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to abstain because I haven't been able to listen to this discussion on this one.
Okay. Member Straight?
Yes.
Member Straight is a yes. And let's see. Member Booth, do we have a vote from Member Booth? Okay, I think that covers it. Yeah. Let's see. 2. Yep. Okay, that motion passes 11-2 with 1 abstention. Member Davis abstaining, Member Reel, and Member Lear voting no. Okay, so that's the amendment. We now have Member Hart, Vice Chair Hart's motion is on the floor as amended. Any further discussion of that motion? Seeing no lights. Motion is that the board direct staff to evaluate current educator training requirements, provide recommendations on potential changes to a committee, and provide information on pretest logistics, content, and the logistical commitments of the board. So, please vote. Member Davis.
I'm abstaining.
Okay. Member Straight.
Yes.
Thank you. 13. We get everybody? Let's see. Okay, that passes 13-1 with Member Davis abstaining. Member Norton is. Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay, that motion passes. So we will have the discussion on frequency, and that'll come in January. This will be referred to a committee. We have one more item on the task force. Should we turn to Specialist Cannell on that one? Or Deputy Stallings? Who's teeing that up? All right. I should say a couple of related items, but separate from training. Sorry, Member Klein.
Yes, in the chart that came in the document for Utah Code of Board Rule Training Requirements for schools, like a lot of the, well, not a lot, but some of the links don't work. They're old links or old rules that don't even exist anymore. Just take note. Check that.
Yeah, let's update that. Which item is this? Is this
like
number
page
1 or 2?
Um,
Item 1.
I don't know. It's the draft 1 for the Utah Code training.
I'm trying to
Board
find the
rule
action
training
item.
requirements
Maybe
for school. It
that's
looks like
action
this.
Item 2.
Yeah, like it has a R277105, which was repealed in 2019, and
I'm just
and
trying
it
to
doesn't
find. I
reference
think this
new
is
things that have been
is this
passed
the-
since.
Is this the document that's titled Task Force Recommendations 2023 at the top?
No, it's Greg's
It's with the chart that shows the regulated
I'd like to see it.
or related
So,
regulations.
If somebody
sorry.
could tell me where it is, that would be helpful. I just don't know where there is. All right, let's go to Greg to tell us the next.
Thank you, Director Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Moss. Greg Cannell, USBE Policy Analyst, giving a report on the Reports and Requirements Task Force recommendations for 2023. The task force has been meeting again, and we've come up with, on this paper, 5, but because we just talked about number 2, which was Jennifer Thronson, or Dr. Thronson's recommendations, then we're just putting forth 4 of these recommendations. The first of that is that the board recommend that the legislature and board amend requirements for teacher training plans to be due at the end of September rather than August. The task force members had a discussion about this and found that that would help relieve a lot of the stress on administrators and teachers if they were able to put in those plans and have a little extra leeway rather than the tight deadline of that August deadline. Number 3, recommendation that the board support staff's decision for AP and concurrent enrollment in international baccalaureate applications to combine the report into one access point and reduce the questions to those only specified in code. This was a suggestion and possibility that was brought up by staff that the task force recommended as well. And essentially it would just put these applications in one place and would reduce the number of questions to just those required in code. Number 4, that the board amend R277471-13 to remove the school plant capital outlay report requirements. This is a recommendation that we had last year from the task force that the board voted in favor of, and we'd just like the board's vote again to move forward with removing this piece from the rule. And then number 5, that the board supports staff in using the fiscal note process to provide suggestions for a reporting review period or a sampling for review, and to provide an impact statement on the proposed bill with the purpose of better informing the legislature on the possible reporting burdens and FTE needs the proposed legislation would create. Number 5 represents a lot of the ideas that the task force came up with last year, and we ran those by Representative Pulsifer, and she took it to her colleagues up on the Hill, and the information we got back from her is that rather than put it into code, a better move would be to use this process that's already allowed for in the fiscal note process of putting impact statements on the bill to help legislators understand the impact that it would create on LEAs with regards to reporting burdens, as well as the impact it might create on the USBE with regards to manpower needed to implement whatever the reporting or data that those new legislative pieces would require.
Thank you very much, Specialist Cannell. Member Klein and Member Bogus. Do I have this right? Nope. Bogus and Klein, sorry.
I just have a simple question, sir. So, director, correct? Is that your title? I don't know that it matters.
I'm always taking raises, but just policy analyst.
Okay. So, sir, you said teacher training plans, and it might sound a little weird, but I don't know whether you're referring to a training schedule or a remediation plan. And I asked a couple people, and then they didn't know either. So I just would like clarity on what you are actually referring to, so that I know in my mind. Thank you.
Member Bogus, is the educational professional hours plan that they make with their administration.
Yeah, so currently it's required 5 days after the first day of instruction, and so this would move that to like September 30th.
And I apologize. We should have had that specificity in there. Specificity. No, but that was another inside joke. Sorry. Member Klein. We got it.
I only see 3 of those recommendations on the agenda, not 5.
This is agenda item 5.1.2. Task Force Recommendations is the name of the document. and it's got 1 through 5, but 2 was the training element that we addressed with Director Thronson. So
Is there more than 5 on the list? Like I see like a 5-page document.
no, though that's
The task
that's
force
an
recommendations
informational
2023.
that's an informational item that probably
Okay.
could have been separated. The actual recommendations are that first page that lists 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Just 3.
So that could have been, I think, separated as an information item to be more clear. But the recommendations are on that first page that says Task Force Recommendations 2023, 2 having already been addressed separately. So 1, 3, 4, and 5. Other questions or comments? Member Wood?
Question on number 5, if we had the oversight framework in place, would this fiscal note process be needed?
Yes. Was that a question for? I can answer it if you like.
Well, I know you've done a lot of work on
Yeah.
on both, and so but it seems like that's kind of what we're trying to go for with this framework, is that whether there's an FTE, what kind of. So I'm just wondering if this would.
This is prospective. So, you know, what this does is kind of raises to the level of legislative review the question of what is your bill going to do, and we get however many each year, right? Going forward, the proposal we initially made to Representative Pulsifer is that she actually proposed some kind of legislative rule similar to our own internal policies governing our work, or a bill that would say, before bringing a education bill forward, you must determine whether the data is already available, analyze how tough it's going to be, et cetera. Her recommendation was that we handle it through the fiscal note process instead. So this is, I think, works well if the framework is passed, because that will describe what is. This will attempt to kind of apply that review process with our input to each new bill that comes through. I see those working hand in hand, but Deputy Stallings might have a better answer.
I would just add to what you said, just that I think they're both, they'd be companions. It's not necessarily that one would fix the other, but they could both be used together to support and inform the legislature through the fiscal note process better.
I'll just say I appreciate Representative Pulse for making that offer to us. It was basically saying, hey, you guys take the opportunity to tell us what this is going to do to LEAs and make any suggestions you'd like for revisiting those reports so that they don't end up in perpetuity and we're back here in 20 years doing what we've been just doing now in the task force. It's an attempt to kind of systemically get on top of the process that generates all this stuff. So appreciate that invitation from the legislature. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? If not, let's, Member Bogus? It's 4, you are correct. So this is 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
We did 2. Yeah, 2 was addressed separately. So this is 1, 3, 4, and I apologize. There is a little bit we could have cleaned up here, but it's 1, 3, 4, and 5.
It's all good. I just wanted to
Thank
have
you.
that clarity. Thank you, sir.
Okay, members, let's vote. We're voting on 1, 3, 4, and 5 in those recommendations. She's tweeting. Well, she does.
She does a whole bunch.
I thought we made it coming out. Did we not actually make a formal motion? Gee, all right. I thought we teed it up.
Okay, Fred.
All right. Oh my gosh. I thought we did that from the start. I think so moved. Okay, go ahead.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Matt made the motion.
Now we can vote. Sorry. Seeing no other lights. Okay, so that. Talking too much.
Every fiber of that. You have no idea.
I got it. No, I got it.
Do you need food?
Yeah. Can you technology to
Can you ask the online members?
Okay, Member Davis?
Yes.
Member Straight.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes. I think it's 12, right? Okay, that passes 12-2 with the no votes being Member Bogus and Member Klein. Thank you very much. Analyst Cannell, Deputy Stallings, that concludes the task force recommendations. And brings us to, let's see. That's it. We did everything else, didn't we?
Yes, I think so.
Unless there's one thing in, we need to do board member comments. Yes.
Okay, before we go into the study session, we have board member comments and board chair report, which will be brief to non-existent. Hey. I'll match you. Let's do ping pong with chair reports because I got a bunch saved up too. I've been skipping that chair report because we don't have. Yes, we are open though. We are open for board. We are open. We are there. So board member comments. The floor is open. Member Bogus and Member Green and online. If you have board member comments, we're opening the floor now to that. So yes, board member Bogus.
I would just simply say thank you for keeping this agenda item and honoring it. I have nothing else to say right now. Thank you.
I will just say thank you for your comment. Member Green.
I too am echoing what Member Bogus just said. Thank you. I'm just kidding. I actually have a message. Okay, I actually I'd wanted to share this yesterday, and I'm kind of sad because a lot of our staff is gone, but this is a highlight. So I don't know, maybe I could forward this to you, Superintendent Dixon, and you could share this. But so last week, 5 Utah ACTE members were recognized as finalists at the National ACTE Awards Gala. 2 of them brought the national title home. And in our district, at my daughter's school, Mrs. Plew was one of those finalists. And so they go through this big, interview and, things that they have to compile. She's already been a star in our lives and for that school and the things that she's done for some of our students. And they started a courtyard club, which they've, completely renovated this space. My daughter's involved with that. And we call it kind of like the secret garden. And she's brought, she says that 3 students, I believe, have started greenhouses because of her effort, just the introduction that they have because of the floriculture and the horticulture and those types of courses. So just a quick review of what that was. In January of 2023, we all won our individual categories at the Utah ACTE conference. We moved on to Region 5 to compete against 9 other states, and Utah took 5 of the 8 regional award titles. We then went through a series of steps and an interview as one of the 5 national finalists in our individual categories, and she included the names and categories below. So Michaela Plew, UACTE Region, I'm going to look silly, the V is a 5, right? Region 5 and national finalist, new teacher of the year. Jason Gobble, AG educator at North Sevier. He was Region 5 and National Finalist Teacher of the Year. Kip Hansen, AG educator at North St. Pete. UACTE, Region 5 and National Finalist Carl Perkins Award. Jan Jardine was UACTE, Region 5 and National Winner Lifetime Achievement Award. And Rob Belknap, UACTE, Region 5 and National Winner Administrator of the Year. And so I just wanted to send a shout out and say Utah was pretty cool this year and good things going on. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Member Green, we'll make note of that for
Thank you, Member Green. Member Booth.
Thank you. Some of you may have heard from one of my folks from down in the Provo School District, who she's a grandmother. In her retirement, her hobby has become researching lunch times and how the amount of time that you spend in lunch affects wasting food, affects nutrition, affects children's health. And she has done extensive research and I believe has shared an email with most of the board at some point about her research. And I spoke with her for about an hour and got a copy of all of her research, which I'm going through the holidays at some point to pass on to you. She just got a ton of really good information. And not that I would feel as a state that we want to overreach into the local district and tell them how to organize their lunch times, but she's done the research right down to the district by district. She knows how much time each child has for lunch. And some of our schools have 15 minutes that they're actually allowed to be in the lunchroom before they head out to lunchtime recess. And she's been doing research in her own district regarding how much food is going into the garbage can because they just simply don't have time to sit down and eat, and what an impact. She's sat down with Wendy Dow, the new superintendent in Provo district, and they've decided they're going to make some changes. And she's got a committee and principals group all working together to try to figure out. She's also come up with ideas on how you can possibly make some adjustments to this and that and the other in order to give them an extra 5 minutes. And so I just think it's interesting. It has implications for kids' health. It certainly has implications when I think of the kids in Zimbabwe that I shared with you in my board member message in January, who only get, food-wise, they only eat what they are served at school because there's no food at home in Harare, in that particular school of 700 students. I think of them eating that little bit of porridge that the Ezra Taft Benson School of Nutrition, Food and Nutrition, or whatever that is, down at BYU, has designed as the perfect source of your daily nutritional requirements. And they have that little porridge, and that's basically all they eat in Harare because there's nothing else available. And then I think of these kids in all of our schools, not because they wouldn't eat it if they had just a little bit more time, but they're just rushed and they'd rather play, so they throw it all away, and we're just seeing all that food go down the drain with all of these kids starving. You know, my mom used to say, "Oh, think of the starving children in China," and all this stuff when I was a kid, to try to get me to eat my carrots or whatever it was that I wasn't too excited about. But I think it's something that we as parents and grandparents and as very interested educators might want to wrap our heads around and maybe make just some suggestions of you might want to consider this because this is what a lot of people who know about children nutrition and about its impact on education are saying about these limited lunch periods. And so I'm going to be sharing that with you, just forewarning you that you'll be getting something in your email, and hope it'll be of interest, and maybe we want to discuss it at some point in the future, see if we can't improve the amount of food that the kids are eating and the amount of time they have to eat it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Booth. Appreciate that. Member Wood.
I just wanted to share. So last month, when Kelsey brought the National Board Certified Teachers to our member educational highlight, I took the opportunity to connect with them and spent a morning at Rose Park Elementary and was able to be in a classroom for 4 hours. We did rotations from kindergarten through third grade. And then afterwards spent an hour where I met with the teachers and they talked about some different things, the intentional educational design that they had used to work with their students, the way they chose partners for hands-on activities very specifically as to who they paired up so that one could lead and one could follow and support them, the use of technology, and then different math, hands-on math things. And at the end, I just was so appreciative to see the inspiring education that's going on in these classrooms. And they asked me to just share the invitation to any of you, if any of you would like to do a similar thing, to come and visit and see the great work that they're doing with they have 11 languages spoken there. They mentioned that you're the music teacher there. But it was really, really great, inspiring morning.
Thank you, Member Wood, and sign me up, please. I'll definitely take you up on that. Any other board member comments from the ether or elsewhere? Okay, I'll do a very, very quick. Were you?
I was thinking about it, but no, go ahead.
I'll do a quick chairs report. So if you want a board member comment, come on in. I'll save the
Just
chairs
a couple
report 'cause it's
things.
separate agenda item.
I think I went back to ExcelinEd, and that's where, and I don't know, I'll have to look at where my suggested research projects came out, but there's a lot of research and information about what benefits communities and families and where they're, nationally, where some things are headed. And hopefully Utah can get on board with some of those items. But just a couple things. I appreciated just the general feel there and the engagement with being proactive in education communities and trying to look at where the research is and where it's headed. What was the other thing? Sorry, there was one other thing I can't remember. Should have wrote down. Anyways, well, Merry Christmas. There you go.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Earl. I'll do a quick chairs report. In a similar vein, I'll just say it's been a year that we've been in these positions almost. Time flies. And I just want to say thank you, express the really intense enjoyment that comes from working with you all. We have an amazing breadth of background, experience, perspectives in this body. It's somewhat unique in being an elected body that's statewide, focused solely on one particular policy area, and I think we all agree that's the most important policy area of education. So we've got a lot of disagreement, we are learning, we have hiccups, but I hope I've taken every opportunity to promote and defend this body as a singularly important place to discuss education policy. We oversee a great agency and full of staff. We also represent this body to the legislature, to stakeholders, and I just think we've got a great group here, and so I appreciate the opportunity to work with you. We look forward to continuing to learn and improve and grow, and as we've got a legislative session coming up, we look forward to presenting the decisions of this body to the legislature. It was a good opportunity last year to do that, and I think we've made a lot of relationships. We look forward to working with all of you to advance the goals that we've prioritized here and the policy recommendations that we've made. So that's it for me. Thank you and Merry Christmas. And let's move on to our study session. We've got the completion of at least this phase of strategic planning. We've got a mission and vision with some, I think, very descriptive and inspiring ideas